5. Joining us now in the Element Wealth Studios, Grant Callen, founder and CEO of Empower Mississippi, and Leah Ferretti, ESA Mom. ESA, of course, stands for Education Scholarship Account. Welcome, Grant, Leah, good to see y'all. We've got a lot of stuff going on with respect to school choice across the country. Has been a movement for sure.
Yep.
I think to some extent, Grant, this the COVID lockdowns perhaps spurred even more interest, more initiatives, more effort. But most recently, the great state of Iowa, Governor Reynolds is set to sign a bill that would fairly significantly expand school choice and specifically ESAs in the state of Iowa. You keeping up with that?
Oh, yeah. Very, very excited. And you're right. The pandemic did more to disrupt the current situation and just remind parents that they ought to have education options because they started, for one, learning more about what their kids were learning, and they started shopping around and seeing that maybe their school was closed, and so they were looking for something else. And we've seen this massive surge toward parents looking for education options. And Iowa, particularly Governor Kim Reynolds, as you mentioned, she has just rode this wave and said we're gonna act first to make sure families have education options. So the House passed a bill earlier this week called the Students First Act. The Senate debated it for hours last night. It finally passed, I think, around midnight, and it goes to the governor's desk today where she has led the charge for this and pledges to sign it. This act is transformational, and a couple of the particulars of it. Every child that chooses to go to a private school will get $7,500, and the school district that the student departs. So if you're in a district and you have a student who leaves to go to private school utilizing this Students First program, you're going to get $1,200 for a student you no longer have to educate. And the idea there was a recognition that there are some fixed costs, there are some things that you're going to have to spend regardless of whether your enrollment drops some. And so their program goes into effect this fall. It will, in year one, will focus on public school students, current public school students who want to switch, and private school students that are low income. And then within 3 years, it'll phase in, and every student in the state of Iowa will have the option of choosing where they go to school.
$7,600 from the state, which is the full amount of taxpayer money the state invests in a student's education, would follow the student to their school of choice, including a private school. That's something that's been discussed here in Mississippi, but has been met with some resistance, for sure, which is why we really haven't gotten that to the level that we'd like to see it get. Tomorrow, Leah, the annual school choice rally at the state capitol. My understanding is you're going to be a keynote speaker.
I know. What an honor.
That's great.
I don't think Grant could find anybody else, so he called me to come MC, but I am tickled to death. This is actually my family's 5th year to be involved at the school choice rally, and my children look forward to it every year because they are the reason, we need school choice, and they're the reason I promote school choice because that's where we started on our journey.
Tell the audience, if you will, your personal experience with school choice and why you have such a strong interest in this.
Okay. Several years ago, my husband and I, we moved to Cleveland, Mississippi to utilize our public schools. And, it was just, we were going to send them to the local school, no questions about it. At the time, we didn't know that our oldest was dyslexic and he was struggling. We call it his second tour of kindergarten, knew something was wrong. I am a school teacher as well. So we went and had him diagnosed, evaluated for learning disabilities. And at the time, I didn't even know that he had dyslexia. Diagnosis came back, dyslexia and all the fun things that come along with dyslexia. And living in the Mississippi Delta and in Mississippi where, some of our resources are limited. And there was not a dyslexia therapist in the school district that my child attended. And I just assumed that he would get the correct resources. Mm-hmm. so we didn't have a choice but to go back, for me to go back to school to get my master's degree in dyslexia therapy. And I went back to school to help my own child. And then from there, of course, dyslexia is inherited. So lucky me, maybe I should buy a lottery ticket. All 3 of my children are dyslexic.
Wow.
And so, it was God's journey for us, for me to go back to school to provide that therapy. But however, there was no therapy services allowed in the school. So, of course, as a mom, I'm desperate. I'm calling around. I'm Googling, like, what can I do? And I came upon Empower. And through Grant and his organization, they directed me, to apply for the ESA, what the ESA was. I'm like, why don't we know about this? And here we are in our 5th year that both of my boys have benefited from the ESA, and now we're in a school of choice where I have the freedom to educate them how I choose fit.
So dyslexia is more pervasive, I think, than the average person understands. And the central challenge is that it requires specialized instructors.
Yes.
Instructors, teachers that are familiar with it and understand how to educate a student with it. It's a different approach than a student without dyslexia. And the problem is we just simply don't have enough, and we can't staff every school in every district with one. So if you're a parent of a child that is afflicted with it and you are tethered to that particular school due to your address, which is what our law says, it's a problem in that your child's not getting the proper education.
Oh, absolutely. And they're just going to currently slip. They're going to slip further and further behind if they're not giving the appropriate therapies.
Right. So the ESA allows the family to enroll the student where they can be best educated to deal with and accommodate their dyslexia and make sure they grow up to be able to be a productive adult. And that's the end result that we're looking for.
And at the end of the day, it's the parents that take the children home. That's what I tell my parents. I'm like, you take them home at the end of the day. Like, you need to, know what's best for your child and what they need to be successful.
Yeah.
And it's also worth mentioning, because there are a lot of families that have dyslexia, but because they don't have an IEP, do not qualify for the ESA program. This has been a struggle for a lot of families. They're basically locked out of the program because in a lot of places you can't get an IEP for students with dyslexia. Some you can, but in other places you can't. It's really inconsistent. So there is legislation this year that Representative Larry Byrd is advocating for that would expand the ESA program to students with dyslexia or an IEP explicitly, which would make sure they're covered.
Is that determined at the district level?
Yes.
Is that how that works?
Yes. And I'll say, and it's not easy to get dyslexia on an IEP. I had to fight tooth and nail to get it on my child's IEP. And now, we are fortunate that our district does recognize dyslexia on the IEP, and it's just a stronger paperwork, so to say, red tape that protects your child and makes sure that your child gets the correct services that they need.
Yeah, and just for the benefit of our audience, that's an individualized education program, right? Is that what it stands for? Correct. It just means that the student has been deemed to need a different education model than a standard student without dyslexia. Mm-hmm. That's the bottom line here.
Or any special needs.
Yeah, or any special need. I'm not limiting that to dyslexia, right. So the School Choice Rally tomorrow, Grant, that's something that Empower has held since the inception of the organization, right?
Pretty close to it, yeah. I think our first one was in 2014 or 2015, and we took a 2-year kind of hiatus because of COVID, although we did events around the state. Last year we did a bus tour where we went to schools around the state and brought National School Choice Week to the schools. But we're back at the Capitol and extremely thrilled to do so. This event is just such a beautiful, diverse picture of the diverse education landscape that is Mississippi. We've got magnet schools and traditional public schools participating, and charter and homeschool and private schools. And we all come together not talking about what makes us separate or one school's better than another. It's just a celebration that we can all come together and celebrate that we have options and we need even more.
What time is it?
It is 9 a.m. tomorrow morning on the south steps of the state capitol.
It's something to behold. Everybody's there in the yellow scarves, and a lot of the students, the teachers from the charter schools, and those that are participating in the ESA program, so forth. You guys want to hang around?
Love to.
We got Grant Callen and Leah Ferretti in the Element Well Studios talking about education choice in Mississippi. Stays. Our guests are Grant Callen, CEO of Empower Mississippi, and Leah Ferretti, who is a mom who is taking advantage of the Education Scholarship Account, which that program's been in place for 7-8 years now at this point,
Yeah,
right?
it passed in 2015.
Yeah. All right. So right at the 7-8 year mark. Any legislation that you're working with those lawmakers on in this session related to school choice and education choice?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things that are going to be before lawmakers this year. We've talked briefly about Representative Larry Byrd's bill that would expand the ESA program for kids, explicitly expand it for students with dyslexia. I think that makes a ton of sense. There's also an effort to expand the ESA program to foster kids. So Representative Bill Kincaid up in DeSoto County, part of his story is coming through the foster care system.
Right.
And he has a bill that he's introduced to say these kids have so many disruptions in their lives, and their moves often from parent to parent, and having the certainty of knowing where they're going to be at school and not have to be jerked around based on where the parents live just is a no-brainer. And it would also be a way to help, I think, encourage more families to step in and become foster parents if they knew that there was going to be a way to give some continuity for their kids in their education system. So this bill would just expand the current ESA program to kids that are in the foster care system.
Yeah.
So those are two ESA legislation. There's a number of bills that would make the process to become a charter school more streamlined, more easier to do. There's a real challenge right now because of, I know you've talked about and others have, the inflated grades that our public schools and district schools have. We went from having 30-something D or F rated school districts that would have been eligible to open a charter school in those communities to there's 13 now. And I wish that, I mean, if that were an indication that our schools have just jumped tremendously in their performance since COVID, that'd be great and worthy of celebration. And there are places where they're growing, but most of that was an artificial inflation right after COVID because of a real drop-off.
Right.
And then growth in the year following the pandemic. So there's a couple of bills that would address that and try to open up new districts for charter founders to open their school. All of this is about following in this parent-led movement where parents are asking for more options for their kids, whether it's options within the public system that's public-to-public choice, options like a charter school, options like a magnet school, options for private school, for all of the energy and the talk and the work that has been done over the last 15 years to give parents more choice. There's still only about 15% of kids in Mississippi that are in a school that's not the one they're zoned for.
Yeah.
Florida, that's about 48%.
Right. Arizona, another. Louisiana's had a lot of success with charter schools. You got states like New York that initially really went gangbusters in building out charter schools, forming charter schools, and then you've got anti-charter school government now that's trying to take all that away, strip all that out. How do we get to where Iowa is? I mean, this is really quite transformational for Iowa. You got to believe that there are other states, particularly those that are more friendly to education choice, that are watching what's happening there in Iowa.
Well, I think there's two factors. Everywhere you've seen massive school choice, transformational change come, you see parents stepping up, speaking out, leading the charge, and you see lawmakers and political leaders responding to those parents and taking courageous actions to make sure parents have what they need.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the formula. And, I think for a lot of parents, Leah could speak to this, you don't think of yourselves as a political activist. You don't hate public schools. You're not fighting. You don't want to be a political agent. You just want your kids to get a great education. And so but we have to ask parents to step up, lend their voice to this, get engaged, because that's the only thing that's going to change this.
Leah, I know that you've been a regular at the school choice rallies, and you're serving as the MC, as you informed us tomorrow. I've been as well. I've seen you there. You can't help but be moved when you attend those rallies, and you look in at the faces and the eyes of the students and the parents, and they seem so happy, so excited, so energetic. You just got to feel good about that and come away feeling, yeah, this was a good thing for Mississippi.
Oh, yeah, I've got chill bumps right now just talking about it. I mean, you look around and those in the eyes of other mothers who can empathize with you because they've been on the same journey as you.
I've seen them cry at the rally. Yeah, I know you have too.
I have cried at rallies before. But when it comes to your child, there's no limits. There's no limits. As a parent, you just want what's best for your child. And that's what's so beautiful about the rally is because we're all coming together for this is good. This is a good thing, and we are thankful and we're so blessed to be able to live in a state and in a country that we do have choices,
right.
And we just need more of them.
Right. Yeah, and so I think, and I'm sure you would agree with this, Grant, we try to get folks out of the Capitol to come witness this firsthand, those that are responsible for advancing the ball here on education choice. I don't see how they could witness it and not be impacted.
Well, and they have been impacted, and if you take the long view, there's no doubt we wouldn't have charter schools, we wouldn't have an ESA program if it hadn't been for Governor Tate Reeves, if it hadn't been for Speaker Phil Bryant, if it hadn't been for, former Governor Phil Bryant and Speaker Philip Gunn, and a host of other lawmakers and statewide officials who have fought for these things over the years.
Right.
I think, if anything, my word of caution is we can't rest on our laurels and say we've done school choice, because we haven't. Only 15% of the kids are exercising choice today. There's so much more need than there is opportunity. And the vast majority of kids today in Mississippi they can't afford to move to better school districts. They can't afford private school tuition. And if you're in that situation and you're not in the neighborhood of one of these 8 charter schools and you're not special needs, you don't have another option.
Yeah.
So we've done great things. It's taken a lot of courage from lawmakers to lead on those, but they've done it. And it's had big dividends for families. We just can't stop. And to your point, when you look at around the country, this stuff is coming. I can't tell you whether it's going to be in 5 years or 8 years or 10 years that we get full education options in Mississippi, but I am utterly convinced it's coming because the future of education looks like dollars following students and parents in the driver's seat, parents controlling where their kids go to school, and parents have an array of options, which makes all the providers more student-centered. It's coming, and we're seeing it around the country. It's coming to Mississippi too.
Yeah, it just feels like that the antithesis to that is protectionism. And we got to call it what it is. And that's what it is, in my view. I'm happy to say that. And again, we got to make the point that this isn't about opposition to public schools.
Absolutely
whatsoever.
not. A number of the students and families and schools participating tomorrow will be public schools.
Sure.
They recognize that they want public schools to be a great option that parents will choose to go to.
Yeah.
And the truth is, this is not what we're advocating for, but if you dropped all the district lines and you said kids could go to wherever they wanted, I think the vast majority of students would still want to go to public schools, traditional public schools.
Absolutely.
Because we have some great public schools. But we can't let the fact that we have some really great, extraordinary traditional public schools keep us from recognizing we also have some really troubled, broken traditional public schools that haven't changed in 50 years and aren't going to change.
Yeah.
And we can hold those things in tension. We have great schools and we have some troubled ones. And the way to fix it is to let parents direct their kids to the best setting that works for them.
Leah, you made the point earlier before we go here that you weren't looking to eliminate or exit the public schools. You were just looking for a way to make sure your child got the necessary education.
Exactly.
I mean, that's why you got behind this movement, this effort.
Yes, here I am. But before we go, can I give a shout out to my second graders at Indianola Academy?
Yep.
I told them that Miss Ferretti would say hello to them. So hello, guys. You better behave for your sub today.
That's awesome. Grant, Leah, thanks for coming on. Good luck with the school choice rally tomorrow. The time again, Grant?
Y'all come out. It's 9 a.m. tomorrow at the Capitol. It's going to be cold. Bundle up, but we'll have a yellow scarf for you when you get there.
Should be fun. Grant Callen, Leah Ferretti, talking about school choice here on Middays. We're stepping aside for a break. Coming right